Hello everyone. My name is Larissa Finley and I'm the marketing manager here at Computeries and the VP of Education for Greater St. Louis MGMA. And officially welcome to our April webinar. Before we start the meeting, some upcoming dates to keep in mind are May 5th through 7th is the Missouri MGMA Annual Conference, aptly named Riding the Waves in Healthcare. And tickets are now on sale for the May 5th through 7th conference at the Hilton Branson Convention Center. You can learn more at www.mgma-mo.org or email our administrator, Kara. She has information too. Also, on May 12th, we're going to be having another webinar for the Greater St. Louis MGMA from Stacy Christensen, Director of Healthcare Brand Strategy at Professional Office Services. We'll be presenting a webinar on marketing and communications to improve patient engagement. So now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Barbara Faupel. Barbara is the practice manager for Allergy Consultants, a 4-doctor practice with 2 locations, with an initial background in nonprofit management, a bachelor's of science and master's of arts degree. Barbara is CMPE certified, a current fellowship candidate, and a past president of the Greater St. Louis MGMA. Barbara is the 2020 MGMA Missouri Practice Manager of the Year. She is responsible for operations and administration of Allergy Consultants. This includes overseeing the business office, lab, and front desk, handling all personnel issues and human resource activities. Barbara manages the physician schedules and credentials, financial, business, strategic and marketing plans, payroll, and facilities management. She also serves as the HIPAA Practice Compliance Officer. So I am very happy to now turn it over to you, Barbara, as you talk to us about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Oh, Barbara, you're still on mute, but that gives me a chance to say that we will be taking questions intermittently throughout the webinar. You can post them in the chat or the Q&A section, and I'll be monitoring the chat to help out with that throughout the webinar. So definitely this is a topic where we want a lot of engagement, so don't be shy, and there's no such thing as a stupid question, because this is a really important topic to talk about. So with that, I will, for the second time, turn it over to you, Barbara.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I was on mute because, doing this from home, it's trash day. So that was very loud going on outside. So thank you, Larissa, for inviting me to speak today. And yes, as she said, as we're going along, I did put in breaks for kind of where it would be a good pause for questions, but also with Larissa, monitoring the chat, I told her to absolutely interrupt me because I don't want to get 3 or 4 slides away and your question was, 10 minutes ago and then have to backtrack it. So please, definitely, any questions. So as she said, I will be talking to you today about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and hopefully, oh, come on. There we go. Okay. Okay. This working? Yes. Okay. So disclaimer, this presentation should not be taken as legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. Please consult your lawyer and other appropriate teams when setting up your employee handbook or implementing anything that I talk about today. This information comes from my office's handbook, from personal experience, a lot from MGMA National, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and many more. I've included my sources and recommended reading at the end of the presentation to help you further any information you might need. Okay. So no matter how many staff are employed in your office, they all need to conduct themselves in a professional and respectful manner. This presentation is not just for healthcare practice managers. It is useful for all types of offices. Of the many tasks a practice manager accomplishes on a daily basis, human resources can be the most time-consuming and tricky of them all. Making sure you never say anything to an employee or a patient that can be misconstrued in any way, taking the time to really listen to all points of view, and keep your practice's stellar reputation intact at all times are just a few of those tasks. While we as practice managers always have these thoughts going through our heads, many of our staff do not. It is our job to make sure our staff are well aware from day one what the practice's expectations are concerning their conduct towards patients and coworkers, and to remind them periodically during staff meetings of any new important changes. So we have 3 learning objectives in today's webinar. One is, what is unconscious bias and how does it play a role in diversity, sensitivity, harassment, and respect in the workplace? How to speak to physicians and staff concerning diversity and unconscious bias and what should be included in your employee handbook. And lastly, what are the most recent changes and upcoming HR decisions that practice managers should pay attention to? So first off, what is unconscious bias and how does it play a role in diversity, sensitivity, harassment, and respect in the workplace? In the past year, the pandemic has shined a bright light on systemic issues that have been pushed forward with movements such as Black Lives Matter and Me Too. Working women having to stay home to take care of children who cannot go physically to school or daycare, minorities being disproportionately affected by COVID due to working in the more frontline jobs, and millions unemployed and without health insurance. These systemic issues run deep in America and include unconscious bias, microaggressions, and intersectionality. These may just be buzzwords to a lot of people, but they're actually very important topics that all managers need to know and know how to deal with. Unconscious biases are stereotypes or beliefs that affect our actions in a discriminatory manner. There's affinity bias, which is showing preference for those who are similar to us. For example, preferring a job candidate because they remind you of a family member or a friend. Confirmation bias, which is gathering information that supports our beliefs and biases while ignoring or undervaluing evidence that would disprove those beliefs. For example, assuming that someone is not well educated due to their accent. The halo effect is an initial positive impression influences the overall perception of that individual. For this, a good example would be thinking someone who went to an Ivy League college will do better than someone who went to a state school. And then there's perception bias, which is stereotyping individuals whom we might not be as familiar with and allowing those biases to affect our perceptions. Perception bias is worse than confirmation bias because you are not looking to confirm your bias. You don't think it needs to be confirmed. You met one person that has specific attributes and you form your opinion around that entire bias. Workplace prejudice often shows up in subtle ways through microaggressions. Microaggressions are brief, everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to people of color because they belong to a racial minority group. First off, there's micro insults. Those include colleagues touching your hair without permission, being told you're not like others because of your race or ethnicity, repeatedly being told you are articulate, others regularly taking credit for your ideas in meetings, being excluded from meetings relevant to your job, being mischaracterized as angry, being excluded or passed over for job growth opportunities, and your manager meeting one-on-one with others in the team, but not you. And then there are micro invalidations. Those include colleagues asserting that they are colorblind or don't see race, having to explain what it's like to live as a person of your race or ethnicity, being mistaken for someone else of the same racial background, colleagues telling you they have friends of your race or ethnicity, and colleagues asserting they are not racist. And finally, micro assaults. And that is colleagues using racially insensitive language around you. I love this quote. There is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. You can see from the diagram here how all of these different things can intersect individually and all together. Intersectional differences are incredibly important to see when talking about diversity and inclusion. Intersectionality is the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating the overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. Because people are unique, many identities are possible. One example, I'll try to go slow, it's a lot. So one example of a group with an intersectional identity would be Black lesbian women. They may have similarities to and differences from other oppressed groups. Black women may identify with the oppressive and discriminatory experiences of white women, as well as those of Black men. At the same time, Black lesbian women's experiences may not be equivalent to those of these other groups. They may experience discrimination as a response to their race, their gender, and or their sexual orientation. That is, for example, even though Black women and white women are both women, and Black women and Black men are both Black, this does not mean the perspectives and experiences of the latter groups are the same as or related to those of Black lesbian women. There are a lot of costs of having these biases in your office. One is burnout. Burnt out employees feel regularly alienated at work. They withhold ideas or solutions, especially within the last 6 months. They say they're not proud to work for their companies and have not referred people in their networks to work at their companies. Then there's busting out. Employees who plan to leave their employer within the year and have looked for another job while on the job in the past 6 months. And then there's blowing up. Employees who have discussed their companies in a negative light on social media and have intentionally failed to follow through on an important assignment in the past 6 months. Inclusion refers to a cultural and environmental feeling of belonging. So what drives inclusion? Having inclusive leaders. Ensuring that inclusive leaders ensure that team members speak up and are heard. They make it safe to propose novel ideas. They empower team members to make decisions. They take advice and implement feedback. They give actionable feedback, and they share credit for team success. When a team leader has at least 3 of these traits, employees feel more welcome and included in their team. They feel free to express their views and opinions, and they feel that their ideas are heard and recognized. Authenticity. Employees often expend a lot of energy repressing parts of their persona in the workplace in some way. For example, women in STEM fields often feel they need to act like a man to become a leader in their field. Also, many African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians say they need to compromise their authenticity to conform to their company's standard of demeanor or style. Networking and visibility. For women and people of color, the key to rising above a playing field that remains stubbornly uneven is sponsorship. A sponsor is a senior level leader who elevates their protege's visibility within the corridors of power, advocates for key assignments, and promotes them, and puts their reputation on the line for the protege's advancement. For those who feel marginalized by their gender, ethnicity, age, sexual identity, or educational and economic background, sponsorship is particularly crucial in invigorating ambition and driving engagement. Having a sponsor increases the likelihood of being satisfied with the rate of career advancement. Conversely, lack of sponsorship increases someone's likelihood of quitting within a year. And then having clear career paths. For women, LGBTQIA+ individuals, and people of color, the map to career success is very murky. Many women off-ramp to take care of children and aging relatives. Also, a significant number of women feel pushed off the ladder, stating their career isn't satisfying and is stalled. They are often frustrated with being passed over for high-profile assignments, and they have a general sense of missing out on the right opportunities. LGBTQIA+ individuals and people of color also struggle to name a simple solution to open up a blocked career path. So what can we do to disrupt the bias? One, have diverse leadership. Inherently diverse executives, it demonstrates that difference is valued at their companies. Advance inclusive leadership. In order to truly see the potential of diverse employees on teams, leaders have to get beyond gut level assumptions. They can do so by creating a speak up culture where everyone feels welcome and included. And again, connecting diverse talent to sponsors. Diverse talent needs sponsors or the senior level advocates to lever them into leadership, effectively bypassing or negating the effects of managerial bias. So the elements of belonging in your company. Being seen. When employees are seen at work, they're recognized, rewarded, and they're respected by their colleagues. Being connected. When you're connected at work, you have authentic social interactions with peers, managers, and senior leaders. Being supported. When you're supported at work, those around you, from your peers to senior leaders, give you what you need to get your work done and live a full life. And being proud. When you're proud of your work and your organization, you feel aligned with its purpose, its vision, and its values. Are there any questions before the next section?
Let's just see if we can, does anyone have any questions or comments or thoughts that they wanted to share? We can give it another minute or so. This is amazing information, I just have to say. There's a lot. I'm definitely going to be printing out these slides and going through each of
it is a lot. That's one of the reasons that I had like the sources and recommended reading, because it's a lot for just like one webinar.
Yeah, It's a good overview and introduction to the topic, definitely. And this is the first time in that I know of in the greater St. Louis MGMA that we have had someone speak on this topic. So it's good. So I don't think we have any questions so far, so you can go ahead.
All righty.
Awesome.
Okay, so how to speak with physicians and staff concerning diversity and unconscious bias, and what should be included in your employee handbook. No matter the size of an office, this topic should be taken seriously. Even in an office with less than 20 people total, there can be a diverse set of protected classes, multiple races, colors, national origins and creeds, multiple different religions, ages spanning the generations, and different sexes. When you add in employees' family and friends and your patients, all protected classes are covered. So the major regulations regarding diversity include, but are not limited to, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was added to with the Civil Rights Act of 1991 and the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009, the Equal Employment Act of 1972, and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Discriminations by type that the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission are responsible for enforcing include age, disability, equal pay and compensation, genetic information, harassment, national origin, pregnancy, race and color, religion, retaliation, sex, and sexual harassment. So, incredibly important handbook entries. One is harassment. Include a statement that your practice disapproves of harassment of any kind. State the current federal ruling on harassment. This should be updated whenever a change is made. And make clear that violations are subject to disciplinary action that may include discharge. And again, anything handbook-wise I talk about, please consult your lawyers for that specific wordage to make sure that it's lawful. An example for this specific part here could be, the practice disapproves of harassment of any kind. The harassment of any employee by another employee, patient, or visitor based on race, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, or veteran status is not acceptable and is prohibited. Any employee who violates the policy will be subject to disciplinary action up to and including discharge. Also, having a section on employee conduct and work rules. This includes language on creating professional and respectful environments for both employees and patients. Because there's no way to list all the possible unacceptable behaviors, just make sure to state that specific fact and then give some examples of infractions that can result in disciplinary action and/or termination. So, for example, to ensure orderly operations and provide the best possible work environment, the practice expects employees to follow rules of conduct that will protect the interests and safety of all employees in the office. The doctors of the practice expect all patients who enter this office to be treated in a professional and respectful manner in a calm office environment. It is not possible to list all the forms of behavior that are considered unacceptable in the workplace. The following examples of infractions of rules of conduct that may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment: sexual relationships with a patient are unprofessional and may be grounds for immediate termination. Sexual relationships with staff members or their spouses, or discussions about such relationships, are unprofessional and unacceptable. Fighting or threatening violence in the workplace, boisterous or disruptive activity in the workplace, insubordination or other disrespectful conduct, sexual or other unlawful or unwelcome harassment, violation of personnel policies, and unsatisfactory performance or conduct, which is kind of a catch-all. Keep your handbook up to date. Anytime changes are made, these changes must be initialed by all the current employees, and then the handbook that you have your new employees read from must be updated. Reading from an employee handbook is not only boring, it is usually done during new employee onboarding and then promptly forgotten with all the other information that you throw at a new employee during training. The only time an employee really looks at the handbook a second time is to double check their PTO, their medical benefits, etc. So keeping that in mind, it's a very good idea to remind your staff of the important parts of your handbook at staff meetings. When you have your yearly HIPAA meeting, add in some reminders. Also, when you change the handbook and are collecting those initials, that is also a great time to revisit those important parts. So, what type of behavior could create a hostile working environment based on sex? This list is not a catch-all. It's long, but there are definitely other things not included. Lewd jokes, sharing sexual anecdotes, sexual innuendos, sexual gestures, making sexual comments about someone's appearance, clothing, or body parts, ogling, leering, or whistling, staring in a sexually suggestive or offensive manner, inappropriate touching or grooming, and that would include kissing, hugging, punching, patting, stroking, rubbing, or purposefully brushing up against another person. Asking sexual questions, questions about someone's sexual history or their sexual orientation, hazing or other pranks, using sexually suggestive sounds, rating a person's sexuality, sexual ridicule, name calling, intimidations, mockery, insults, and put downs, interference or sabotage of work performance, and displays of pictures, calendars, cartoons, or other materials with sexually explicit or graphic content. And now all of this you could include in your handbook. And like I said, it's not an exhaustive list. I would definitely make a note in your handbook that these are examples, but not all the possibilities. What type of behavior could create a hostile work environment based on a protected class, which we spoke about earlier, the number of those. Talking about negative stereotypes associated with a protected class, mimicking an accent, using racist slang, phrases, or nicknames, making negative comments about an employee's religious beliefs, racial slurs, name calling, intimidation, mockery, insults, put downs, and ridicule, making remarks about an individual's skin color and other ethnic traits, displaying racist drawings, posters, bumper stickers, or signs that might be offensive to a particular group. For example, with this, I had to this year remind my staff that when it came to mask wearing, that they needed to make sure it was a neutral print, but that it didn't say anything. And it went both ways. We couldn't have anything that said Black Lives Matter, but then we also couldn't have anything that said Blue Lives Matter. Do not talk about that or display any of that, because you never know how a patient is going to feel or express themselves with that. And you don't know about a coworker's background either. So that is an example when it comes to that. Making offensive references to an individual's mental or physical disability, making derogatory age-related comments, inappropriate images, videos, emails, letters, notes, and social media that make fun of a person's protected class, and wearing clothing that could be offensive to a particular ethnic group. Offices are becoming more divided as our country becomes more polarized. Doesn't matter how big or small your office is, it's an across the board issue. I have had to remind my employees more than once that certain topics are not allowed in the office while on the clock. When off the clock, we can't stop employees from conversing about shared views. However, they need to be reminded that they're not allowed to be anywhere a conversation can be overheard. Final important reminders for your staff. What is inappropriate or offensive behavior is in the eye of the beholder. It's subjective. The intent of the person engaging in the bad behavior is irrelevant. The legal standard is that the behavior need only have the purpose of effect of creating a hostile environment. The behavior does not have to be directed at the person who is offended. The victim does not have to be the person harassed, but can be anyone affected by the offensive conduct. The person also does not need to complain to the person engaging in the behavior or tell them to knock it off. There's a difference between tolerating behavior, what is voluntary, and versus participating in the behavior when it is welcome. For example, two staff members may be discussing anti-LGBTQIA+ views and be overheard by a third employee. That employee, while not the direct focus of the conversation, may have family or friends who are LGBTQIA+ or be in the closet themselves, and a hostile work environment has been created. Be mindful of unconscious bias that may influence how you react and treat other people in situations. Never assume someone feels or believes the same way you do about politics, religion, etc. There's a saying about assuming, which I won't say because we're being recorded. Be respectful of your coworkers and patients. There's the golden rule, which we were all taught as kids, to treat others how you want to be treated. I think there's one more important, which is the platinum rule, which is do unto others as they would have you do unto them, not as you would have them do unto you. An example of this would be if you have an employee whose personal thoughts and feelings towards someone who is transitioning should never be expressed in their words and deeds in the office. The patient or coworker should be treated with respect using the platinum rule. Their chosen name should be used, and the pronouns that they choose should be used at all times. And are there any questions before we go on to the next section?
Any questions, comments, anything? I think everyone's just absorbing all of the information.
I know.
Definitely, for sure. Let's see. Let's give it another minute or so. We do have some questions that were submitted beforehand that we can go over at the end as well.
Okay.
But I think for now, we are good to keep going.
Okay. All right. Okay, so what are the most recent changes and upcoming HR decisions that practice managers should pay attention to? So I did a lot of digging. I had to learn how to navigate congress.org. That was new for me. Okay, so the 2020 update. Last year in June, in Bostock versus Clayton County, I don't know if anybody heard about this, but the Supreme Court held that firing individuals because of their sexual orientation or transgender status violates Title VII's prohibition on discrimination because of sex. As the court explained, discrimination based on homosexuality or transgender status necessarily entails discrimination based on sex, because the first cannot happen without the second. So I've got some examples to kind of break down all that legal jargon. So for example, if an employer fires an employee because she is a woman who is married to a woman, but would not do the same to a man married to a woman, the employer is taking an action because of the employee's sex, because the action would not have taken place, but for the employee being a woman. Similarly, if an employer fires an employee because that person was identified as male at birth, but uses feminine pronouns and identifies as a female, the employer is taking action against the individual because of sex, since the action would not have taken place but for the fact the employee was originally identified as male. However, definitely keep in mind that this decision did not address related issues under Title VII, such as dress codes, bathroom access, or locker room access. It also did not address various religious liberty issues, such as the First Amendment, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and exemptions Title VII provides for religious employers. That's more murky territory. Okay, so there's also a 2021 update. The Equality Act, you may or may not have heard about it. It's called HR 5 on congress.gov. The specific definition of the Equality Act is to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation, and for other purposes. So this bill, I'll explain a little bit more about it, but first, where it stands, it passed the House on February 25th. And then, so it reached the Senate on March 1st. It was then placed on the legislative calendar on March 2nd after being read a second time. So my assumption is on March 1st, they read it, and then they read it again the next day. The most recent action concerning the Equality Act was on March 17th. There was a hearing held in the Senate Judiciary. So first, I'm going to kind of break down a little bit of what is in the Equality Act if it were to pass. The bill prohibits discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity in areas including public accommodations and facilities, education, federal funding, employment, housing, credit, and the jury system. Specifically, the bill defines and includes sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity among the prohibited categories of discrimination or segregation. The bill expands the definition of public accommodations to include places or establishments that provide exhibitions, recreation, exercise, amusement, gatherings, or displays, goods, services, or programs, and transportation services. The bill would allow the Department of Justice to intervene in equal protection actions in federal court on account of sexual orientation or gender identity. And it also prohibits an individual from being denied access to a shared facility, including a restroom, a locker room, and a dressing room that is in accordance with the individual's gender identity. So basically, the Equality Act would tie up the loose ends from last year's Supreme Court decision. Now, in looking at everything on congress.gov and navigating my way through all that, it's always up to date, which is great. March 25th was the last time the Senate Judiciary met. HR 5, the Equality Act, is one of 4 bills in the Senate Judiciary Committee that have passed the House first and then gone on to the Senate. And there are 210 other bills in the Senate Judiciary for this session as well. So while we need to pay attention to it, because, you know, if it passes or if a part of it does, you know, just kind of what's going on with it, it will affect our employees, our patients. But that being said, it's not going to happen tomorrow because they're very busy. Okay, with that, any questions?
Okay, I'm going to leave it open for just a moment or so. So I do have one question that was submitted earlier, and since it's called unconscious bias, where is a good place to start to see our own biases so we can help our employees as well?
Okay, so in my recommended reading list, I know I've got, let me pull it up here. So there's a link to the Harvard University's implicit association test. It's an online self-assessment which determines your level of unconscious bias, which kind of will at least give you kind of a, you know, kind of keeping it always in the back of your head. You know, things you wouldn't think of or realize, oh, I kind of make that assumption every day, or, you know, those types of things. It'll help you bring that out of the unconscious. In addition, the Association of American Medical Colleges has an unconscious bias resources page specifically for health professionals. I know there's been a lot I've seen, which has been nice, that in the past, you know, couple of years, as more of this has been talked about or brought to the forefront, that we're seeing it trickle into not only the media, but into shows or, you know, things that people are going to watch and not, and be like, oh yeah, you know, but for us specifically, you know, not assuming that, okay, you know, someone who has a Native American background or an Asian American background, their health is going to be different than someone of an African American background. So you have to keep that in mind and be conscious of those types of things. And then also at the same time, to the biggest thing, and I'm sure it is on here when it comes to the resources, is to just listen. You know, I know it is hard, and it's hard for me too. I work for a private practice, so my physicians are, they're my bosses. They sign my check, but they also have entrusted me to run their office and to make sure, you know, that their employees and their patients are taken care of. So trying to remind them to listen to their patients and, you know, to keep this stuff in mind. I realize it's difficult to manage up, but I think, and I don't want to, you know, not trying to stereotype, obviously, being that that's what a lot of this is about. For some physicians, at least, giving them a bottom line. You know, if you say certain things or you react in a certain way, that patient could go online and blast you about it. It could be incredibly bad press. You could lose patients. You could, you know, lose income. Your reputation could be sullied. You know, those types of things might help at least to get them to listen to you, and then you can go from there.
Okay, so I have a question that's kind of flipping it a little bit. So what if you have someone on your team who seems to, they might be one of those people that gets offended by a lot of different things, and let's call maybe a person that complains a lot or is just very easily offended by all sorts of things. How would you, some of them might be like justifiable, or how would you approach that situation?
Trying to think.
Did I throw you for a loop?
No, it's okay. It's good. Keeps me on my toes.
Yeah.
No, that kind of brought me back to the, where was it? The, that kind of that platinum rule part of, do unto others how they would perceive. I think sitting down with the person and trying to, ask them where they're coming from, is that, can they specifically justify, it's not just, oh, this person like just would not stop talking and they're driving me insane, or is it specifically they're talking about this one thing and it offended me? To to just listen and see, and then, go back to them with it. Okay. Well, what about this from their point of view? I have had to do employee mediations where each employee got to say their truth without interruption from the other one. And then we tried to come to a middle ground from that. If they're never going to be satisfied, that's harder.
I mean, yeah, some of it crosses over into just HR things too, I think, in terms of like upset employees and what you would do about that. Yeah. So I've just experienced, not personally, but working with lots of different people in all different backgrounds and everything, that in all sorts of backgrounds too, there's people that just are easily offended more than others about certain things too. So that can be challenging, I think.
It can be, but on the other hand, it might be valid that they've never been listened to, so they've just gotten louder and louder. You know what I mean? Possibly, but I got, that would just, be an individual circumstance.
So I do have one more question. For many of our employees, the LGBTQIA+ identities and issues are new information for them. Where is a good starting point to help our employees be more welcoming?
Okay, so let's see. In my recommended reading, okay, where is it? There's a link to the Fenway Institute's National LGBT Health Education Center. And they've assembled a resource to assist frontline healthcare staff in developing affirming environment for transgender and gender nonconforming patients. And then when implementing best practices, they even have like a script for your employees to follow. I definitely have gotten this. My office is quite small, under 20 people, but definitely, spanning the ages, and some people have never experienced, I think it might have just been last year, we had our first patient whose mother called, and the patient's transitioning. So we had to go through, one, legally, obviously, if their dead name is still on their insurance paperwork, we unfortunately have to have that still in the computer. But what is their chosen name? And that is what we will call them. What pronouns? And, I have pop-ups galore and, written all over the chart. But I think the biggest way to make patients, you can put it in the chart, you can ask them those questions, but then it's really showing them that you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. We had to submit for further testing. So when we sent over like the facts with the information, on that front of it, we had in big bold letters, this patient is transitioning, use these names, these are the pronouns, to make sure they have the best possible experience while going through that difficult time. Is very important to just put yourself in their shoes. And how would you want someone to help you? How would you want someone to advocate for you? We are taking care of patients' health. We need to advocate for not only their anything physical that we're helping them with. For us, it's allergies and asthma. Okay, but also everything is linked together. So are we advocating for their mental health? Are we advocating, we have food allergy patients who need to talk to someone because they get super, super anxious now whenever they go out to eat, and all those different types of things that, our physicians took that oath. And as a byproduct, everyone who works with those physicians are a part of that oath. At least I feel that way.
That was awesome preaching, just saying.
I'm trying not to be too preachy.
No, it's good. It's good. Stacy just had a comment. Great job on an important topic, Barbara. Thanks for the recommended reading.
Yeah, I was going through, and I know obviously with us being the local chapter, not everyone at the local chapter is a state member or a national member. So as I was going through, like at that national level, they've had multiple articles that I read, and some of them by the same person. So he must have done like a super deep dive, and just kind of had to split it up into multiple articles that I read and either put into the presentation in some part, so it's actually a source, or it's in the recommended reading. Because myself, obviously I read this stuff because I was doing this specific presentation, but we are all so busy and have so much on our plates and things we never even thought we were going to have to deal with in the last year that we just don't have the time to do those deep dives. So having that's why I really wanted to have those sources and that recommended reading, so that where to start and to go, instead of having to start from square one when I've already done the square one stuff for you.
So we have a few other comments from Greater St. Louis MGMA. Can I get an amen with exclamation point? And then Matt from PNC Bank said, so many things to remember, but it all comes down to respect, which was one of your earlier slides. Great job with a complicated subject.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely, definitely the respect, and that platinum rule is definitely the, with anything, if you think you're saying something wrong, or, even with me, like doing all of this, and I'm trying to not be unconscious about my bias because I've done all this. So like I can see where I've done things or not done things or not spoken up when I should have. But just trying to do our best, and then be honest when we fall short, and then just keep trying.
Sorry about the bell. So I will do some announcements. Barbara, can you talk for just another few minutes? If you wanted, I have to run and get the door for a second, or if there's any other questions, I'll
I do have the chat box open, so I can see if there's any other questions.
Okay, I'll be back in just a minute. Yeah,
I did make myself a note this morning. I was trying to find, she will be talking about the conference in a few minutes. Thank you, Stacy, for that.
Okay, I'm good. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a delivery. It's always at the exact right times when I have to say some announcements and everything.
Okay, let me go to okay, is it going to let me go past my sources and all my recommended reading. There we go. Okay.
Okay. So officially, thank you, Barbara, for this amazing content. You can keep an eye out for an email from us with session handouts, on-demand viewing information, speaker contacts, and a survey to complete about today's presentation. We appreciate your feedback and use your input to improve the quality and responsiveness of our educational events. Also, don't forget to join us for our next virtual session, May 12th, on marketing and communications to improve patient engagement, all starting at noon. Learn more and register at mgmastl.org. And lastly, now is a great time to renew your MGMA membership for 2021 if you haven't already. It's not too late. If you're new to the Greater St. Louis MGMA, you can become a member today and you will get membership pricing for all monthly meetings at our annual conference. You may renew or sign up online at mgmastl.org or contact our chapter administrator, Kara Nagel, at administrator@mgmastl.org with any membership inquiries you may have. We appreciate all of our members and invite our guests here today to join and be part of this great network. We are having a live fall conference in October this year. Final details are going to be sent out pretty soon. So that's going to be our first live event for the year. So we do have a pop-up poll. If you want to just take a minute and fill that out, that would be great. And it's about the conference. If you're planning on attending, yes, no, if work permits. We're also looking for help planning said events. If you would like to volunteer your time and talents to that effort, we're going to have a great, I don't know, party, conference, get to see each other in person after over a year and a half it'll be.
We miss everybody's faces.
I know, not just the Zoom faces.
Yeah.
You know? the actual people. So thank you again, and I'm gonna end it for today. Okay, thanks again. Bye everyone.
Bye.